All right, well, we're wrapping up this series today called Growth Spurt. Hopefully, it's been a good time for you to think about things that will result in spiritual growth. That's what we've been thinking about. I don't know about you, but I am constantly taking my temperature, meaning my spiritual temperature, and it's just something I've always kind of thought about because that verse in Revelation 3 scares me. And it's not in my notes, I'm just riffing here, but you're neither hot nor cold. You're lukewarm, and I just never want to be that. I've been cold before I met the Lord, and I've been hot, but the call back into this mediocrity, this status quo, this coasting, this kind of just staying put is terrifying to me. It's terrifying to think about how good God is and how He's called us to grow in Him and mature and be more like Him all the time and shaped into His image. And then I think about this thing with growth spurt about, I remember certain growth spurts I had where I could not eat enough. There's a big difference, if you think about it, between wanting something to eat and being hungry. You ever been hungry? You're just hungry. It's not like, oh yeah, I like something to eat, or, give me something to eat, but it's like you cannot get the food fast enough. You cannot get enough because you're truly, truly hungry. And there's a big difference. And I think sometimes in our faith, we want something to eat. I'll go to church. Maybe I'll hear a sermon that will encourage me or equip me or challenge me or help me. And so you want something to eat. But that's a big, big difference between being hungry for the Lord. And as we think about where we've been this series, are we hungry for God? Do we have a hunger and a thirst for Him, a relationship where I said week one, if we want to grow, we need God. Like we need Him, like the body needs food. We need God, we need each other. Are we hungry for each other? Are we hungry for that relationship, that community, that connection? Do we understand just how vital one another is? Are we hungry to serve? I'll serve. I'm willing to serve, or I understand like it's good to serve, but do you need it? Do you want it? Do you be like, God, show me this opportunity. I've gotten these resources. I've got this amount of time. I've got this talent, this skill set. Show me, like I'm hungry to serve. And so are we hungry for that? Do we know we need it? Is it not an option, but a necessity? And then last week we talked about sacrifice, the need to sacrifice, how it's hardwired into us and how God calls us to do it because that's who Jesus was. He laid down His life. He said, come follow me, but pick up your cross. And Bonhoeffer says, the call to follow God is a call to die. Well, today we're going to look at our need to worship, that we've got to worship. Like it's not an option, and it's not even like a little important. It is a priority. That's why we wrapped up the series, because it ties in all of the other things that we should be doing that will result in growth. But I would submit to you that maybe nothing more than ascribing God the glory He's due, lifting up God, making much of the Father, letting yourself and everyone know around you that God is number one, is the thing that can catapult you in your faith more than anything. I went to the optometrist this week. It's something that I try to do every once in a while, just to be able to see my eyes are getting worse. And so I went there, and they had these letters in a box with a light behind it. And I couldn't read certain rows of letters. I would try, but, a D was an E and an E was an F, and I was giving it my best shot. But then he would put a lens in front of my eye, and the letters would pop out, and it would be like, oh, yeah, no, that is an F. That's not an E. No way. That's not an O. That's a G. Like it just became so clear. And I thought about worship. I'm sitting in the optometrist. That's what pastors do. They're always kind of thinking, like, how does this preach? I'll get in a fight with Kim, and then I'm like, hey, how will this preach? I'm just kidding. I've never been in a fight with Kim. She's been in a fight with me plenty, but anyway, I digress. But the letters were there the whole time. The whole time. But I couldn't see them. They weren't into focus. And I think there's something about worship that is this beautiful lens that we look through. It's this, oh my goodness, God has been here. God is in our midst. God is among us. God is present. And it's just this matter of focus where it just comes so clear. Now, I'm big on God's word and prayer and needing God, and I love community. And I love to serve, and I love to sacrifice. I don't always love to sacrifice. That's a little bit untruth, but you know where I'm going. And I love to worship, and I'm growing in worship. I said to Kim during worship, Kim, there's a warning. I think God wants me to get on my knees. You know I don't like this. I've been fighting him for a song or two. But if I go down, I'm not having a heart attack. When I'm at my age, you warn your wife. Like if you hit a knee, like, whoa, you okay? No, I'm just telling God he's great, and I'm not. But I'm learning to worship. But this weekend for me, I went out with Dawn on Friday morning, and we got out there and got things set up, and the other guys came out on Friday night and Saturday, and it was awesome. Now, I know what you're thinking. You see a bunch of guys with guns. Unless you have like a bleeding heart for targets or clay, skeet, that's the only thing that was hurt this weekend. Nothing else. Not each other or anything. We did have some fun. We did do some shooting. It was great for me personally. I'll tell you, skeet's fun to shoot. It's not that good eating. That's an old hunter joke. Just follow me on that. But I'll be honest. My favorite part, I love my time with my brothers. I loved the activities. I loved the sitting there and jaw-jacking on the porch just in our chairs. But I slept outside on Friday night on a cot. You could hear the coyotes getting closer and closer. I had a plan. I had a piece of beef jerky hidden, and if they got too close, I would chuck it to the other side underneath Woody's tent. That was my plan. Or he had a hammock, actually. I was like, if I just get it in Woody's direction, they'll start with him, and I can get in the house. But I saw 6, 7 shooting stars. And the stars were big and beautiful. And there on a cot by myself, I worshiped. I ascribed to God glory that he was due. I saw God's power and presence came into focus, unlike on the front row worshiping with instruments, unlike in my word, in my prayer closet, unlike any other way. There in creation, it was a time for me to connect with God and worship. Now, those guys are still up there. They're having fun. I want to give a shout out to you guys. It was a great weekend, and hopefully the next time we go, there'll be even more men that will join us in that. We're going to be in Acts chapter 16 today. It's a tough story. I'm not going to lie. It's a challenging one, and I'll make it even more challenging as I ask us to walk into it and juxtapose it with our lives, because that's what a good pastor does. He doesn't just preach about that. He brings it to this. But I wanted to give us a working definition of worship. I think it's not the only one, but it's one that I connect with. It's from Louis Giglio, who knows a thing or two about it. He started the Passion Movement, getting college-age young people to worship God in the tens and hundreds of thousands. And he says this: worship is our response, both personal and corporate, to God for who he is and what he's done. So when you think about worship, it's easy to go straight to praise, easy to go straight to singing, and it's that. It's easy to go to Sunday morning, it's that. But it's a response that's personal and corporate. It's to all that God has done, is doing, can do, will do. It's wow. It's it's awe. It's reverence. It's slack jaw and mind blown and heart racing and it's also to who he is. And God's so merciful. Wow. He's so gracious. Wow. He's so patient. He's so powerful. Remember when you were a little kid, you maybe sang that song, "My God is so great, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do." Now in Acts 16, I'll give you a quick update. Paul and Silas are on a missionary journey spreading the gospel in Philippi, a Roman colony, and they're there, and there's this woman named Lydia, seller of purple cloth, and she becomes a believer, and she's baptized along with her whole household. They keep ministering. They encounter a slave girl who's possessed by a spirit that enables her to tell the future. So, of course, people want to monetize things of God often, and she earned a lot of money for her owners during the course of her fortune-telling career. But Paul and Silas, this girl was following them, and they realized it, and so they're shouting, the demons in her, the spirits in her are shouting about who Paul and Silas are. You're servants of the Most High God. And finally, they turn and they're distressed, and they cast out this spirit of this girl, and now she can't predict the future and tell it anymore. And so her owners are basically stuck with this resource that doesn't produce money, and they're not happy at all. They've lost a lot of income. So they seize Paul and Silas. They accuse them of causing an uproar in the city and advocating unlawful customs for Romans. blah, blah, blah. And the crowd turns, and then the magistrates has them beaten. So we'll pick it up right there. 22. The crowd joined in the attack. Remember that word, attack. Joined in the attack against Paul and Silas. And the magistrates ordered them to be stripped. So you're doing ministry. You're doing God's work. You're helping this girl who's tormented, although she's helping others make money, and she's distressed and possessed, and they strip you publicly and beat you with rods. Not switches, not straps, rods. Verse 23, after they had been severely flogged, they're thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. Now, verse 24 talks about their feet are fastened. They're in the inner cell. That would have been the most heavily guarded part, the darkest and deepest part of this Roman prison. It would have not been a nice place, but a harsh, a grim, a brutal place. There was a common area, but then there's this inner cell. It's the most dark, cramped, poorly ventilated. It was where you would put the worst of the worst. So it's an interesting detail that the murderers or the rapists or those that are just super bad would have been there, and now they put Paul and Silas for helping in this jail, feet locked up. Juxtapose that to your and my morning. Slept in a nice bed next to my lovely wife. I woke up with an alarm clock, and I had clean water and a nice warm shower, and I got dressed, and I drove here, and so many blessings, and I ate a meal and walked through this room and prayed and worshiped. And it was just this beautiful morning. And then I find myself at 9:30, let's worship. And my heart begins to ascribe God glory, and I begin to speak truths about God. I begin to remind myself. I begin to communicate to my brothers and sisters, hey, I believe, you believe, we believe together this gift, and we turned our eyes upon Jesus. If you can't worship in this scenario with encouragement and air conditioning and freedom and light and beauty and instruments, but yet we often go, I don't know about worship. I don't know if I liked worship. You know, I got my hands in my pockets. I got my voice half raised. I got my heart half in it. And here's Paul and Silas. Feet fastened, dark room, not a good night's sleep. But we'll see in verse 25, it says, about midnight, Paul and Silas, check it, were praying and singing hymns to God. If you read that text and don't do the hard, holy work of asking yourself, could I do that? When you see shooting stars in the Milky Way and the beauty of creation, yeah, you can say, oh, God, you're so good. When you're with your brothers and sisters on a padded chair in a safe environment, you can say, oh, God, you are so good. But when you've been arrested and stripped naked and beaten with rods and put in a dark prison with the worst of the worst, and it's midnight, I don't know about you, but I could easily predict that I would be the one with my eyes closed, just trying to forget about the day, trying to get a little sleep, trying to block out the pain and the evil and the problems around me. And maybe if I'm communicating with God, it might have been more like, why? And what's up? And come on? And when am I getting out? And I was trying to help, and like I would be a little bit complaining towards the Father. At least I could see that. They're praying, singing hymns. This is a cool detail. The other prisoners were listening to them. There was something happening in that worship service, that gathering, that moment, that was inspiring, or at least interesting. Verse 26, suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. I've been in multiple earthquakes as a resident of Northern California and growing up and spending my formative years there. I've never seen the doors fly open, but that's the situation, that's the scene. The prisoner doors fly open, the chains pop loose. And again, do yourself the opportunity to not just read the text, but let the text read you and go, if I'm free, am I gone? I think I'm gone. If I'm free, no doors, no chains, here I go, especially in an earthquake. Verse 27, the jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword. Wow. What a reaction. He drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought, as he would, as is normal, the prisoners, man, they've escaped. Prisoners have escaped. But Paul shouts. Paul, he's praying, he's praising, and now he's shouting, don't harm yourself. We are all here. Where do you get that kind of strength and that kind of perspective and that kind of wisdom, or like understanding, like forgiveness and gentleness, and like they had to be so in the presence of God that the people that put them in the stocks, they weren't the enemies. They could see things in the spirit realm. They could see things in the big picture. Don't harm yourself. We're all here. They walk out of that prison, and the jailer is moved. Now, maybe only because they didn't leave. You could argue that theologically or from the text. But I would submit to you that not only were the other prisoners listening to them pray and praise at midnight, but the ones that were challenged or tasked with guarding them closely, that were right there in those quarters, listened as well. Because as incredibly miraculous as it is for you to get your chains broken and your doors open and you don't leave, and then you tell the guy that was going to kill himself, don't do this, that's a miracle in itself. I would submit to you, at least for me, it's a miracle to be in chains, in prison, after you've been stripped naked, beaten with rods, and abused, and it's dark, and it's midnight, and they're praying and praising God. Whatever it was, one or the other or both, it moves the heart of the jailer. And he says in verse 30, he brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? Like, how do I have what you have? How do I get what you've got? Like, what must I do? They replied, believe in the Lord Jesus, and you'll be saved, you and your household, because they understand that faith continues to move and affects. It influences. There's ripples to it. To be able to praise when things line up, when things are right, when things are easy is still right. But the test of maturity, the test or the byproduct of a growth spurt is when worship is your response, even when all hell is breaking loose. Do you still turn your eyes upon Jesus? There's a verse in Micah. Micah 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Like worship, if we limit it to praise and singing and hymns, I believe we've missed the real definition. Because if that's the only time or place that you ascribe God glory, that's the only place you turn your eyes upon Jesus, well, then you're not going to find yourself praising in a prison, singing in the stocks. There's no way. I love Paul's definition of worship, Paul's working definition. I love it more than Louis Giglio's, I'll be honest. This is through the paraphrase of Eugene Peterson in the Message, but it still, I believe, rings true and is in line with the message theologically of the original text. It says, so, here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday. Y'all just plug in your jobs, your routines, your friend group, your tasks, what you find yourself doing. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping and eating and going to work and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. What you think of God is what you give to God. How much of your life, how much of your routine, how much of your heart, how much of your mind, how much of your strength, how much of your soul. It sounds a lot like Deuteronomy 6. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and strength and soul. Like place it before God as an offering. I thought of an illustration that I believe Kim showed me years back, but I've never forgot it. I need a volunteer, and I'm looking. I'm going to go with Carter Fine because she's right there in an aisle. Always get an aisle seat, Carter, because you're the closest. So let's just stay right there. This will work because it'll make sense. See this quarter? This represents God. I know that's a bad representation of God, but let's just call it God. And all your family and friends and church and this whole place represents your problems, which is, again, really awkward and kind of sad to think about. But for the purpose of this, we're the pain, we're the problems, this is God, right? So when you've got your eye on God, but when everything else is in view, you still are aware of the pain and the problems. Go ahead and close one eye for the purpose of this illustration. It will help me make my point much more clear. I forgot that Kim had me do this. So keep your focus on God, though. You still got pain and problems all around you, but just keep looking at this quarter. And there's eventually a point where, I wash my hands, here we go. If your view of God is so eclipsed, so close, so focused, did it kind of make everything else disappear? See, I think it's the same with us with worship. Yeah, you got the bad news from the doctor. Yeah, this is happening at work. Yes, your adult kids are up to this. Yes, your physical health is experiencing this. Yes, these are the realities. These are the problems. They didn't go away when Carter kept her eyes on the prize. But the more she focused and the closer she got, and if I was doing it real accurate, I probably would have had Carter come towards God. But I believe God also has a way of, in worship, coming and meeting us. And there's this beautiful connection to where God becomes so big, all we see is the Lord as we turn our eyes upon Jesus and we look full at his wonderful face. And the things of this world, they grow strangely, it's an odd word, strangely dim. Like it doesn't make sense. Strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. I love that phrase, glory. When little kids, when your little kids were little, remember they come around the corner butt naked, I'm talking little, appropriate little naked, like not teenager naked, but they come around the corner as a toddler, and you would maybe say that, oh, there he is, in all his glory. It's because there was nothing hidden. That's why I use that phrase. And when we think about glorifying God, we're literally removing the things that are hidden. We're seeing more and more and more of God in all his glory. Growth happens when we learn to focus on God's presence more than our problems. I don't know it to be true, but I sense it. I sense it. I sense it as I look out and I see my brothers and sisters, my friends, our church, our sheep. Like I sense that some of us, maybe a higher majority than usual, sense some type of attack. Feel at some stage in their life, at some level, there's this attack. There's not a settling or a peace. It feels like wolf and sheep stuff, like an attack. I know I feel it. And often when there's an attack, we begin to pray. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's right. But in the Scriptures, the primary biblical response to a spiritual attack, or in this case, a physical and spiritual attack, is that we don't pray our way through a battle. We praise our way through a battle. So that thing between you and your family member, that thing about your unsettled spirit or this decision or this opportunity or this relation, like this thing that is, you feel it's being attacked and the enemy's in it and there's not peace and and so God, can you help me and give me wisdom? That's appropriate and good, but in the scriptures, often when it's the worst, that's when God's people begin to ascribe him glory. In fact, in the Bible, they would literally lead out with worship. They would send praise into the battle. You praise your way through it. And if we look at this story and look at just the basics of it, like they took care of somebody, they helped somebody, they served this servant girl, and ministry is worship. Like if we reduce it only to the stuff in the prison, we've missed it. Ministry is worship. But then they're in the prison and they're praising, and that's worship. Other people were looking, other people were listening. God was being glorified. Their heart was being reconnected. They weren't complaining or looking at themselves or their problems. They were focused on God. Praise is worship. And then witness. I mean, let's be honest. Somebody's got you in prison. They're about to kill themselves. You're like, that's one bad guy. That's one less, don't put your sword down. Like there's something about the way they interacted with this jailer that was worship. But not only is witness the act of sharing, and when they said, what must I do? The act of sharing their faith, but I believe, going back to, it's around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and worshiping, and everyone around, all the prisoners were listening. I believe that worship is witness. And so somebody that maybe is far away from God, disconnected from God, disenchanted with the church, not sure of what this Christianity stuff's about. They know what they read in the papers. They know what they hear on the news. They know what their family experienced years ago. But the jury's out on us. And we can greet them at the door, and we can put the hand out. But maybe they come in here, and they see sold out, surrendered, all in, worshiping, eyes turned upon Jesus people. And they know these people aren't problemless. Like we all know we got the battle and the problem and the pain and but could it be that they're just witnessing our worship becomes a witness? Like their heart is moved to the Father because our hearts are focused on the Father. Worship, let's say it like this, is exalting God to his rightful place and priority in our life. It's taking a far view of God and bringing it close. It's taking a non-useful relationship with God and making it the most important thing. It's saying God is one of many important things in my life. These are all important. I have a pantheon of gods and idols, and God's one of them. No, God is above all, over all, the most, the one, the only one. And if we could learn how we're wired, how we need, if we could develop a hunger for worship, like we get in here early because we don't want to miss one lyric of one song. Because this is a time that we remind each other. We remind our spirit. We encourage our own heart. As we commune, we're saying, God, listen, I remember my grandfather sometimes when I played golf. I remember my grandmother sometimes when I drank coffee. I remember people that I used to be in relationship with when I'd see different reminders of them, people that have gone before. But every week, we have this moment to make a memory, to remember that God gave it all, that God is over all, that He is able to forgive sin, that He is. And I'm really, really grateful for it. I'm grateful for you gathering and communing and remembering God, because I'll forget. Thank God for my wife, and thank God for my family, and thank God for our church, because you'll remind me. My prayer and hope is that I'll remind you. And together we will turn our eyes upon Jesus and ascribe God the glory that He is due, the place and the priority. As we take the bread, remember the body given. As we take the juice and remember the blood shed. I pray that the thank yous and I love yous and I need yous and you're good and you're great and you're glorious, these inner thoughts would come up and out of us. And worship would be the response of the realization of God's, in light of His glory and grace. Let's pray. God, let's turn our eyes upon you. Jesus, let's look full at your wonderful face, so that the things of this world would grow strangely dim in light of your glory and your grace. I pray that we would praise our way through every battle we face. We would praise you when it's easy, when it's natural, when it's expected, and we would praise you when it's hard, when it's not expected, when it seems like the last thing we should be doing because the pain is so real, but our praise for you would be even more real. We need to worship God. Remind us of that and grow us up. Let us be fully surrendered, fully committed followers of Jesus that turn our eyes upon you over and over and over again, acknowledging your glory and your grace with everything we do and say. Through your beautiful name, I pray for a church I love. Amen.